In most software, there are settings that you can use to customize how it works, looks, and feels so that it works the way that you want it to. QuickBooks, of course, is no exception. But there's really two sides to it in QuickBooks. The first is that there are your personal preferences based on your profile, as well as those for the company as a whole. And that's where it becomes even more important because QuickBooks, being financial software, has a variety of settings that need to be set up for the company. In addition, when you're working with finances, it's probably a good idea to have security in place so that not only your business information is secure, but so is the information regarding your customers and your vendors. In this chapter, we'll take a look at how to set up preferences and security using QuickBooks 2009. If you're just joining us, you can open the current file by looking in the Chapter 4 folder of your class files. If you've been following along, just know that I added one more account since we worked with the chart of accounts. I added Classroom Training, just because I wanted to have all three options here for some work we'll do later on. Now, on to Preferences. In order to get to Preferences, all you need to do is go up to the Edit menu, come all the way down to the bottom, and click on Preferences. Now there's a whole bunch of categories on the left-hand side, and we'll go through some of these, but we're not going to go through all of them. What you also need to realize is that there are two different versions of preferences. There's a tab called My Preferences on the right, which set your preferences as a user, and there are Company Preferences, which of course set it for the entire file. My Preferences will only apply when you are logged on using your user profile. The Company Preferences will apply to everybody. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, like I said, but I do want to start off at the top with accounting. That sounds like a good place to go. We can see that there are no personal preferences as far as accounting goes, and that makes sense because accounting shouldn't be a personalized thing. Accounting should be a standardized thing. If we click on the Company Preferences tab, though, we do get to see some options. One that we've already used when we set up our chart of accounts is the ability to turn on or off account numbers. Ours are currently turned on. There's also a checkbox here that says Require Accounts. And I have to kind of smile when I look at this one because it really goes against everything that we're trying to do with QuickBooks if you disable this check mark. If you disable it, you can create transactions without attributing them to any accounts. Basically, we're not doing double entry. Actually, we're not doing any entry at all. We're just saying, for example, I got $100 and nobody knows what it came from. Did it come from training? Did it come from consulting? Did it come from a return? We don't know. So my recommendation, even though this is available, is that you do not use it. Go ahead and leave that check mark on. Another option that we have here is the ability to use date warnings, and we've already seen this as well. Warn if transactions are so many days in the past or so many days in the future. This is basically related to typos or the fact that in most accounting and most companies, you shouldn't be pre or post dating transactions that much. Now, you certainly could go back and make some corrections, so it's not going to prevent you from entering the transactions. It's just going to bring up a warning if you try to do things that are too old or too far in the future. When you finish up a quarter or a fiscal year, you will also be going through a closing of the books. Now, what that means is you've done all of the accounting, all the reconciling, and everything is set, and you're saying anything prior to this point should not be tampered with. Once you do that, you will actually see the last closing date here. If I move back over to the left-hand side, one of the categories I want to look at is the desktop view. So we'll give that one a click. And we can see things that show up on our home page when we first launch QuickBooks. Now, some things are an option. We have to see invoices, we have to see enter bills and pay bills, but some other things we can turn on or off. You will also see on the bottom half of the screen that some of your preferences have been turned on. For example, estimates, sales tax, inventory, payroll. These were things that we answered during the Easy Step interview. Even though they may not be set up yet, they're at least turned on. If you click on the links, you can work with each of these. If I go to the My Preferences tab, because My Preferences does have desktop settings, this is how you personally will work within QuickBooks. For example, do you want to see one window or multiple windows? Do you want to save every time you close the company? And do you want to save the desktop specifically is what it's talking about. If you don't like all of the things that QuickBooks tries to help you with, you can turn off the check marks for showing the coach and showing the live community, and you can even customize the color scheme of QuickBooks. Sea green is actually the default, but if you click on the drop down, you'll see there are many, many, many options that you can use to make it look exactly the way that you want. The good news is that if you go down and you choose to have something rose colored and your friend who doesn't like that thinks that denim is better, each of you gets to have their own because these are actually user settings, not company settings. I think everybody should go to the desktop view and everybody should probably also look at general. Notice that if you do make a change in any one of these, it asks us if we want to go ahead and save the settings before we continue on to another category. I'm going to say yes. It leaves the dialog box open though. Now when I go to General, we can do things like, how do you want the cursor to move? Do you want it to beep when you do different information? Do you want to pre-fill accounts when you're working with different types of things? I know there's a lot of information here, but if you just read through them once, take you maybe 10-15 minutes, then you'll know what's available and you can customize it to work exactly the way that you want. Remember that these particular items are for yourself. Once again, we can also go over to Company Preferences and see some different things. One that's important is the time format. If you're billing by the hour, or if you have hourly employees, this is something you want to take a look at. If I work 8.5 hours, for example, do I want that to show up as 8.5 using the decimal format, or 8:15 showing the hours and minutes? Something that seems fairly simple, but it's one that can drive people crazy if they don't have it set up the way that they want, or the way that they want to enter the data. There's a couple more options here that I want to go through quickly because I think they're important. One is the reminders feature. This is another one of those that can really drive people crazy if they're always getting these little pop-ups, or it can drive people crazy if they don't know what's due. This is a very extensive list of everything that you can be reminded of, and you have a choice to either show it as a summary, show it as a list, or not to be reminded at all. If you choose one of the first two options, then you get to choose how many days before or after that event happens that you're going to be notified. For example, if you have checks that you've written and you've checked that they needed to be printed, then you can choose to be reminded of those, and if so, how many days before the actual check date. So if I want to send out all of my checks on the 15th of the month, I can be reminded on the 10th of the month that I need to go ahead and print anything that hasn't been printed yet. You'll see that it's a fairly extensive list with everything you can probably think of, and there are differing options. For example, it's days after the due date if I want to send overdue invoices or be notified of overdue invoices. Another option that people don't often think about because we're talking about bookkeeping and accounting is spelling. QuickBooks does actually have a spell check, and this is a good idea because it's really poor performance to send out something like an invoice or a statement that has typos in it. Notice that there are no preferences for spelling as far as the company is concerned, but we do have preferences for you as a user. The option is to always check spelling before printing, saving, or sending supported forms, and I really recommend that everybody check that. It may seem like it's annoying, but do you really want to send something out that has a typographical error in it? You also can do a little bit of customization. For example, you can ignore internet addresses, numbers, capitalized letters, all uppercase or mixed case words. A couple of notes I wanted to make about things that aren't here. If you're looking for audit trails, if you've used QuickBooks in the past, you are not going to find audit trails anymore. Since 2007, QuickBooks has converted it to an always-on status, so there's no checkbox like there used to be in the preferences. And don't forget that if you want more details about any one of these options, you can always go over to the right side of the box and click on Help, and there are all kinds of help topics that will explain which each of the categories and each of the options will do. If you get things kind of messed up, you also can click on Default. We see that button several places in QuickBooks. And of course, if you want to save your changes, you can always just click OK.